let's start again. So MyPortfolio is for New Zealand schools. There is also a version myportfolio.ac.nz, but that is not the focus of my talk today, because the versions are, or the two installations are just too different in their features. Because myportfolio.school.nz is more advanced, because the Ministry of Education has put quite a bit of money into the development of new features that have also gone into Mahara itself, which is an open source e-portfolio system. And we are going to implement these an additional set of new features now for term 3, which is starting on Monday. And if you have an account on MyPortfolio over the weekend, you can already play with the new features. And Jackie, I'll also send you an access to the staging site so that you can play around a bit more on that then. And as you can see, new features, for me this is like being in a candy store. Because new features are always really exciting and they make things new and shiny. You have suddenly all the functionality that you talked about in discussion forums. And so this session will kind of be a tour de force through some of these new features. I'm not going to use an active installation of MyPortfolio because, as you've seen throughout the last 2 days, wireless is quite slow. So I don't want to take any time from that, but hopefully have some time in the end so that we can also discuss some of these features. MyPortfolio.school.nz has been in existence for a little bit over than a couple of years. It's supported by the Ministry of Education and primarily there from the Managed Learning Environment Project, headed by Paul Seiler and Ian Monroe, Amy MacGyver and Andreas Kuh, which are quite heavily involved in that as well and part of the project team. And the Ministry of Education's MLE group, what they try to do is not focus just on one technology, but enable schools to use many different technologies to make them fit their needs. So that you work with a student management system, you have a learning management system, you can use Wiki Educator, there's a portfolio system available to you, and the design of where things are hosted, whether they are locally hosted, whether they are in the cloud, or whether they are somewhere else on the continent or in a different part of the world, that is not being defined and prescribed, but that is always left up to the schools which services they want to use. But the MLE group tries to assist the schools to bring all the resources and technologies that they need to survive in today's environment together, and also enable single sign-on access and make things easy for teachers and students. MyPortfolio.school.nz is one of such services. It's a software as a service implementation. That means no school needs to install it on their own server or have a hosted version, and it is supported for free until the end of 2013. After that, we don't know yet because the current contract for hosting and support goes until then. But the more users there are, of course, then the ministry will also think more clearly about extending that. Currently, there are approximately 700 schools already registered, and we have over 35,000 registered users. But that doesn't mean that everybody has already started using a portfolio and has created content, has uploaded content. But approximately 17,000 active accounts are available on MyPortfolio. And throughout the day, between 200 and 400, sometimes also 600 users log in. That is users that are students, that are also teachers. And if you looked at the access statistics from the server, it's usually around lunchtime that most people are online. So that's kind of kids checking their profile page where they have a wall available, or they might upload some content or might add something to their portfolio page. Since February 2011, we've had a major upgrade of MyPortfolio to .school, and that meant that at that point also more schools came online. The ministry also provides free taster sessions. These are 2-hour sessions for teachers that I'll mention a little bit later on again. And so the promotion of MyPortfolio has heavily increased, and since then February, I think we've had around 250 schools, and now we're at around 700. There you can already see the growth potential, and hopefully that'll continue in the future as well and prove beneficial for schools to use as a platform. So after February 2011, we implemented a number of new features, and we also got teachers engaged in discussions on MyPortfolio, and that has been especially exciting for me working at Catalyst, not as a developer but as user support. So I give a lot of community support in the Mahara community itself. But what we decided to do is for the teachers and for the students in New Zealand to have the discussions directly on MyPortfolio and not in Mahara, so that they are still centered around New Zealand, that everybody knows that is our environment. We know the people that we already talk to, and that facilitates the discussions because everybody knows what the New Zealand curriculum is, what unit standards are, what assessment standards are, what NZQAs and so on. So it's just easier for discussions, and there's not yet another login that people need to take care of. And so what we've been doing is starting up a community slowly but surely, and encourage teachers to use the forum discussions to voice their opinion, to give us feedback on the platform, to say what doesn't work, to let us know what they'd like to see. And one of these examples is in particular the primary school theme. So one big feature that a lot of schools wanted to have, primary schools getting onto it and saying, oh, MyPortfolio is way too much academic looking, it's very strict and doesn't look fun for our younger kids, is that they wanted to have a primary school theme, just to make it more lively, bring more icons in there. And our designer proposed that as one first iteration. And so I took that back to the community. There's a group specifically dedicated for talking about using MyPortfolio in primary schools. And I just gave them that screenshot that you just saw and asked them, hey, what do you think about it? Do you like it? Can you show it to your students? What do things need to change? And these are just some of the feedback that we got back from the teachers. Some had taken that screenshot to their classrooms, engaged their year 5 and year 6 students. Some also took it to year 4. And the kids discussed it, and some of them also said, if we just jump back briefly, oh, the clock should always show 3 or should always show the current time. Some students suggested it should be 3 o'clock because then school is out, and just some things that were way out of reach that anybody could ever do. But a lot of very constructive and positive feedback that then led us to version number 2, which looks now quite different and has taken a lot of the feedback that the kids and teachers have given into account. So for example, now you do have technology in there. You do have the landscape on the outside so that the kids can look out, that they see the world beyond. There's also some playthings here. And so we've changed that according to the feedback. And that's what I really, really like about the community on MyPortfolio, is that I can take my questions to them, give it to them, and at least 3 to 8, maybe even more teachers get back to us and give us opinions so that we really build the environment according to the needs. Of course, we can't do always everything, but at least we try to take small steps into the right direction so that it's actually also being used in schools. Because if we just develop it and nobody uses it, then we don't really have to spend any development time on it, because nobody using a software just doesn't really suit the needs, and therefore it always needs to be engaging and suited for the students, but also teachers who want to use it on a daily basis. Another request that came from the MyPortfolio community was that it's not really easy to create a theme, to make it look like their school website or their school learning environment, and the kids can change things. And so what we are also implementing now for August is a configurable theme, so that schools don't have to come to Catalyst or to somebody else and have a Mahara theme created, but they can go in there, upload their own school logo. My school, of course, is the School of Benches, because I like taking pictures of benches. Others can change the background, the navigation, colors, and all these things can be changed. You can't change everything around, but certain aspects of it, making it easy for your school to have a look that you'd like to achieve with your students. So this is the configuration screen where you can upload your logo easily. You can change it at any point in time. You can change the colors. They are color pickers, so you don't need to know the HTML code or the hex code, but you can just choose the color and then go from there. What we've also implemented is language support, in particular Maori language support, which has been lacking until now. And that is especially for the New Zealand community, so that also especially Maori primary schools and other schools can use it in the language that they are actually also using for teaching. We also implement support for Japanese, French, German, Spanish, and these are the ones. Mentioned already German. So it will be easy for each individual student to select the language that they want to use in their portfolio. The homepage will always be in English because that is where you get to when you click on myportfolio.sco.nz. That is the default page. But whenever a student goes into settings, then they can easily switch the language around. And that is good, especially when a school trials a portfolio, for example, in language classes, and they might want to allow the student to see it in the language that they are actually learning and not always with the English on top. The language picker is only for the navigation items. Pages can already be created in any language that you want. So you can also use Chinese characters or write in Esperanto or whichever language you want, because Mahara and MyPortfolio support Unicode. Another big complaint that the MyPortfolio community had was that it's not so easy to find people, because the search always found everybody. And what we've implemented now is that it is definitely, when you search for James Smith, you always come up just with James Smith and not with Jim Smith and Caroline Smith and Amy Smith, but always with that person that you're looking for. And in addition, it only searches in your own institutions or in your own school by default. You can still always search everybody in case you don't find the person that you're looking for, but the default setting is for your institution only. That was a request that a lot of schools had because they didn't want their kids to immediately find random people on MyPortfolio, but kind of restrict it. And having it just in the default setting is one step that prevents kids maybe to look beyond. But of course, since MyPortfolio is an open space, they can still find everybody else later on. Sometimes we are also asked about security and who to contact when a student has put up something that he shouldn't have put up. It has always been possible in MyPortfolio to report objectionable content on every page. Just at the bottom where there's feedback, there's a link which sends a message to an administrator, and they can then look into it. But of course, I, as site administrator, don't know the students or don't have any idea what they've been thinking when they've done that, and therefore we want to put that responsibility back into the schools, because teachers can more easily talk to the students. Oftentimes they even know them and can talk about netiquette and 21st century literacy skills and so on. And for that reason, so that it's very easy for everybody to know who's actually an administrator for a school and who's also a teacher in that school, or who has the role as a teacher, we've included this additional institution screen so that whenever you click in a profile page on a school name, you're led to this page here and can then contact an administrator straight from here, send them a message and ask them, or if you want to join their institution, then that is a way to go. MyPortfolio for me is not so much just about content creation on it or uploading of files, but in a lot of ways also embedding content from external resources. Because nowadays lots of schools work with Google Documents, they use VoiceThread, WikiEducator, YouTube might be used if it's not blocked, Vimeo, and so on, so that all these rich media types should of course also be available in my portfolio and become part of the portfolio. Until recently, it was only possible to embed YouTube videos and Google videos, but everything that had an iframe around it is not allowed for security reasons. So for some of the embedded media types that teachers wanted to have embedded, we needed to create filters. And now it will be possible not just to use YouTube, TeacherTube, Skibi, and Google, but also Clockster, SlideShare, VoiceThread, WikiEducator, Prezi, Vimeo, and Wookie. And so all you need to do is usually just use the URL of the page. You don't even have to hunt down the embed code. Paste that in that URL, and you get your video displayed or your Prezi presentation. So that is much easier than going to a text box, clicking on the HTML editor, and then having to paste the embed code in there. You might have noticed that Google Documents aren't there. That is because they are supplied in a separate block, because one of the developers of Mahara, who's primarily focused on plugins, has developed a Google block which is now in for Mahara. And that means that you can easily embed almost anything from your Google domain. It works both with individual Google accounts and also with Google Apps accounts that are available for schools. And what you can embed is Google Books, your calendar, which you can see here as an example, Google Documents, so regular text processing documents, presentations, and spreadsheets. And you can also include Google Maps. So that makes it easy to also bring your external content that you create on Google in there, so that you don't have to download the file, upload it again to MyPortfolio, go through heaps of steps just to put it in your portfolio. With this block, all you need to do is follow the instructions that are given here under the little I, because it's different for each type of these Google applications. And then put the necessary code in there, and it'll be displayed in your page. Another item that has been bugging people quite a bit, especially those who have already been on MyPortfolio for some time, have uploaded a number of files, have started lots of portfolio pages, have created templates for their students, is that the navigation wasn't really ideal. So what we've done, we changed the pager which lets you navigate from page to page, so that more pages are displayed immediately, so that you can more easily jump from one to the other. But the biggest challenge here was that, of course, some people have only 10 or 20 pages, whereas we sometimes also have more than that. And so we needed to account for quite a bit of these pages, and that's why you have these jump links in there, so that depending on how many results there are all together, these jump links are calculated and are different all the time. So up here it's only a jump link of 3, and here it spans more than 20, or almost 20. And so that makes it easy to go from earlier in a portfolio or in a files area to a later space. If you have been working with MyPortfolio already, you know that you can bundle your portfolio pages into collections, so that you can make one portfolio collection available to somebody else. And using a collection, that also means that any page that is in a collection can only be used in that collection. So you can't use it somewhere else. And again, some people complained about that. And actually a Canadian school had this feature just before Mahara 1.4 was released in June, implemented for Mahara 1.5, but it can be backported into 1.4. And that means that you can now copy a collection. So what you can do is copy a collection, you receive a copy, and the pages, of course, are also copied into your portfolio. And that way, it is much easier now to have a copy, redo it, and maybe also keep one portfolio that you had at one point submitted, keep it as an archive, and continue on a copy of it. For Mahara 1.4, which was released in June just very recently, we had implemented quite a number of usability changes that we had already been using on MyPortfolio for the since February 2011. But of course, you can always continue making changes and continue to improve it. And that's what you see here on this page, the page editor. We've brought in the top navigation bar so that it is now displayed directly on the page and that you don't have to, so that you can just have one stop where you edit your title and description, where you edit your content, and you can also share the page. And what we've also reduced is this block here, so that the icons are not always displayed in two lines, but just in one line, and when you hover over them, do you get a description of what is necessary there. Because this space was taking up quite a bit of space on the portfolio, and thinking about some students who work with netbooks or some people who view that on an iPad or an iPhone, just makes it really, really hard to see and actually drag the icon down into your content area. And so that was one recent addition that our designer has made for the new theme. Going back to external content and also some internal one, we've implemented a new slideshow feature so that you can now, like before, have pictures that you uploaded into Mahara display in a slideshow, but at the same time also have external slideshows shown, like slideshows from Flickr, from Picasa, from Windows, Windows, and also a couple of other services. And that way, all you need to do is grab the link. Again, there's a description. Once you click on images from external gallery, there's a wee little icon saying how to do that for each service. And all you need to do is grab the Flickr URL for that set of pictures, put it into the editor, and you're done with it. You don't have to do anything else. So you don't have to get any embed code. You don't have to look for an RSS feed or download the pictures that you want to see and upload them again on Mahara, but you can just have them displayed in here. MyPortfolio is not only a place for students to create their portfolio, but a lot of times, especially when schools start trialing MyPortfolio, they actually use it for teacher appraisal purposes. So for example, Taba Intermediate and Albany Senior High School use it quite extensively for that purpose. And in some ways, MyPortfolio was still lacking in just making it concise, making information on professional development activities available concisely. And so we've just recently implemented the Continuing Professional Development plugin that was developed by two developers in Europe. And what you can do there is just have a listing of all your development activities. It's not to be confused with a reflective block. So this is really just similar to a resume field where you list all your activities and then also calculates the amount of hours that you spent, so that you're getting a quick overview of how much time you actually were in professional development. And adding the activity is very easy by just using a simple form where you put in the basic information. And then of course you can still use a reflective learning block to expound on these ideas, to actually write your reflections, to link to other documents, and to really get into the area of reflective thinking and also uploading maybe some documents. Now that you've created all your content and amassed it, either by linking from external resources or by uploading it to MyPortfolio or by entering information in here, you also want to share it with others. And the current implementation of the Share Access page, which had changed in Mahara for Mahara 1.4, was not really so easy to wrap your head around, because collections and pages were always shown together and the access list was collapsed if you had the same access right. So that was quite a bit tricky, and so we revisited that page, changed it around so that now collections and pages are separate, making it easier for you to actually see whether you're giving access to multiple pages or just to one page, and then also showing it always for each page who has access to something. As Mahara is not just a place for learning and for reflections, but also engages people quite a bit, because teachers and students have the possibility to leave feedback on portfolio pages and also to leave feedback on individual artifacts. It sometimes becomes important that you just leave quick feedback and not just have to write quite a bit of text. And so we implemented comment ratings. So you can easily now give a 5-star rating to a comment that is then also displayed on the feedback page to give somebody a really quick overview of what you think about that page in particular. So these were quite a number of features already that we looked at. Some of the features that I'm now talking about will not be implemented for next week because the time frame of developing them was just a wee bit too short. And so we'll have another release coming up pretty quickly in August, the second one, so that we put up all the remaining features that are supposed to be implemented. And one of them is multiple file upload. This is basically already possible now. When you create a zip file and upload a zip file to MyPortfolio, you can unzip it there and use all the documents. However, for some people who are not so familiar with zip functionality, that is a stumbling block. So what we're implementing is that you can easily select multiple files and upload them at once to MyPortfolio. What is already implemented is the possibility to send pages to Digital NZ. That is part of the Ministry of Education metadata project, which is in particularly known actually for learning management systems. AcknowledgeNet has been the pilot for that, implementing metadata in its learning management system so that that metadata information can then be shared with Digital NZ. Digital NZ harvests it and makes it available in their catalog. So that means if you have a great teaching resource, if you have a template that you want to share with others around New Zealand, want to have it indexed by Digital NZ, you can make that page public and allow then for Digital NZ to send it. But this setting needs to be enabled by each school. So if you're in a school that says, no, we don't want anybody to publish that, then it can't be done. Or if you're a very open school, then teachers and also students are allowed to send this to Digital NZ. And that way, your resources can be discovered by that service. And it's easy for you also to link to that then. At the moment, when you want to reuse text in MyPortfolio, you always have to write a blog post. That can be useful, but sometimes you just want to have a little note of something, don't really want to put it into a blog that then appears somewhere on your portfolio page, and therefore we are implementing reusable text boxes. So that's also one feature that is coming a little bit later. And it basically works like choosing a blog post, only that it is one little text box. And that now gets around the problem that when you delete a page, all your text boxes are lost. And now instead they are still gathered and collected, and you can refer to them at a later point in a different page. Because that until now is not possible. And I find that a big stumbling block, because you always have to be aware that you have everything in a journal and not as text box. And if you have a text box, you always need to copy the content and you can't use it again. So that is just another seemingly little feature, but that turns out that it requires quite a bit of thinking around how to implement it. Coming back a little bit again to security is that some institutions don't want to give access to everything to other people on MyPortfolio. Simply to keep it a little bit private, especially when there's a primary school with young kids using it, they may not wish every secondary student to see what the kids post. and therefore we are implementing the possibility to restrict certain information from the profile page to just institutions. So very soon there'll be another box here which lists your institution or institutions that you belong to, so that your profile page is only available to that institution per default, and that you can also share pages immediately with your entire institution. Excuse me. That makes it easier not just to choose everybody all the time and having to remember the names, but if you say anybody in my school can have access to that page, then that is the way to go then. So that will also be there in a little bit. Another feature that we are implementing is that you can bundle your blog posts according to tags. Apparently a lot of teachers and schools on MyPortfolio use multiple blogs with their students, and that means that they have a learning blog, then there's a journal for specific subjects, and then for teachers maybe also for PD. And sometimes you want to show certain posts just based on a tag and not based on a journal. So what we are implementing is that whenever you tag a journal post and you have 2 posts, for example, on conference participation, but one is in your PD and the other one is in a subject area, then you can have them listed together, and the person looking at your page can then access them directly from there, and you don't need to make 2 journals available. Another small feature that may not look so important at first view, but that actually has also some implications, again, especially for younger kids and for how kids can contact each other, is that the online user block is now limited to how many people the administrator from an institution says shall be displayed. So you don't have this call of death of online users anymore around lunchtime when there are so many people online, but you can say I only want to show 5 or 10 people, and then when you click on show all the online users, will they only be displayed. Institution admins can also say whether they want to display anybody who's on MyPortfolio, or only users from their institution, or no online users I block at all. So again, this limits the functionality for students, but it provides sometimes more safety, especially for younger kids, so that they don't necessarily see everybody who's currently logged on and get sidetracked, want to send them a message, or just see who's hanging out in MyPortfolio.
So the users can be online, but you just don't see them?
Yeah. You can still find them by going to the search user block, but for younger kids it just gets a bit more difficult. Another big feature that is going to come is a rewrite of the groups. Currently the group types aren't that user-friendly and easy to decide which group type to choose, and sometimes you have to switch from one to the other to actually achieve what you want to have. And so we are doing a complete rewrite of that and implement it in a more flexible way, so that it's hopefully also clearer of how to choose groups and how to do certain settings, and that you can, for example, always invite people to your group, that kids then can also invite friends into the group or can suggest groups to other people, which is currently not the case. And so right now we obviously send links around for people to, oh, you might be interested in that group, and now in the future it will be much easier to do all that. Now we are getting into some more administrative features for the last part, and these have been implemented also to give schools more say into the default settings, for example, upon account creation. So if a school adds a user or also adds users by CSV file, they can now decide on the default settings for friends, for the HTML editor, whether they want to have multiple blocks or not, what the language should be that the kids are going to use, and so on. And that, of course, is only for new accounts and only the default settings, because we are not yet in the position where we restrict more isolated institutions is foreseen for January 2012. And that means that one school can then really block itself off from other schools but still use the service. But it will also mean that teachers can also still collaborate with others. It's just that students or particular students will not be allowed to collaborate with other students in groups or see other profile pages and so on. But we are on a step lower, still having more freedom and slowly progressing towards implementing another plugin where schools have more control over how they want to perceive it. Because in a lot of ways, that is what keeps the growth of MyPortfolio from expanding more into primary schools. Excuse me, because they don't necessarily want their kids to see also secondary schools kids and send them messages or have messages received from them. And so in order to make it a true service as a software as a service platform, it is important that we also listen to these voices and make it secure for everybody to use. Sorry. That also means that we have revised the self-registration process. At the moment, if your institution allows it, anybody can register in it, and then you as administrator can decide whether to take that person in or not. But an account is nevertheless created. And in a way that's not really good, because that way you can still use it. You can't control really who gets in there. And so what the revised self-registration process does is that accounts are only created when an institution admin or site admin says, yes, you are allowed in. And this gives more security for schools who use it. But of course, it also puts more responsibility on the institution admins, because as soon as they let anybody in, then they are responsible for that person and seeing that they really know who requests membership. But what you can always do is disallow self-registration for your institution so that it actually doesn't even appear on the registration screen and not enables anybody to join it then.
Steve,
yeah, sure.
Who decides who the administrator is for a school?
Basically your school yourself. We are not deciding that. You can have one administrator, you can have 5, you can have 10. I recommend that it's not too many administrators, because too many cooks just spoil the soup. But that is entirely up to you. As soon as you're an administrator in your institution, you can add more administrators there. And of course, with MyPortfolio growing, that also means that students want to transfer from one, or need to be transferred from one school to the other. So we are definitely going to encounter that more in term 4 this year, because now it's been at least 1 year where some students either leave the school, or where they need to transfer from an intermediate school to a high school, or from a primary school to an intermediate. And finding a solution for transferring students more easily was very important. So what is possible now is that whenever you take a student out of your institution because they are no longer students, they have a tag on their name so that the intaking school can find them easily based on that tag. So they can then just search for Tara Intermediate, see all the students that have left the institution Tara Intermediate, and can take them in bulk into their own institution. This also does work with single sign-on. So for example, for the Greater Christchurch School Network schools, that will be interesting to check out with you and test it at some point on the environment itself. Because what happens is that even though you have an SSO account, the students still have an internal MyPortfolio username. And so when an SSO school decouples itself from the student receives an email saying, okay, that is your account name. If they haven't had that account earlier on, they also receive a link where they can set a password, and then they don't have the connection to the SSO anymore. And when they are a regular user taken into the SSO school, then a similar process appears that where the administrator has to do a little bit more because they have to link the SSO account to that internal one manually. But it is a start. We'll see how it goes during term 3, probably more during term 4 and right before the next school year starts. But it is better than currently, where you can of course put students into another institution, but you don't have any say around how that process works and whether anybody's notified or not. So now, if you haven't used MyPortfolio yet, or if you have been at the beginning of using MyPortfolio and want to learn more, not necessarily about all the features that I showed you earlier on the about 28 slides that I had, but also how to work with MyPortfolio in general, with your teachers, and how to implement it in your school, you can book one of the free MyPortfolio taster sessions under the URL tiny.cc MyPortfolio taster. And there you can register, and the ministry will schedule taster sessions. Here in the North Island, it is primarily Heath Sawyer, especially for Auckland, down to Rotorua. In the Wellington region, it is especially in, facilitators from Tara Intermediate. Ronja Skandera from Hamilton is also a facilitator. Jackie is a facilitator. And Pete Potter is also in the South Island. And we also have a special language facilitator, so Pascal from Tauranga. She's especially there also to deal with language teachers and acquaint them with MyPortfolio. So if you want to book any of these 2-hour sessions, get your teachers introduced to MyPortfolio, also partner with a neighboring school so that you can exchange opinions better and trial it together, then I recommend these taster sessions highly. If you have more questions, the preferred method I would say is join up your school on MyPortfolio, have your school registered, it is free, create your account on MyPortfolio and jump into the discussions in the MyPortfolio discussions group, because there you don't just receive an answer from me or from Craig Eves from Kineo Pacific, who's the primary support person, but from teachers who actually use the system on a day-to-day basis. And that is what I really like about the community, because the community helps itself. It is not us who work for the support companies, but teachers who create templates, teachers who see the students every day. And that is the worthwhile thing. And therefore I recommend you to go to the website, join in, but of course you can also always send me an email or send me a message on Twitter and contact me that way. And I'm sure to get back to you, hopefully in a quick manner of time. That's so much from me for the features for MyPortfolio. And we still have about 15 minutes left for any questions that you might have, or if you want to see a certain feature. I can happily say that all the features that I showed you and where I said they are going to be online for the beginning of August, they are now up on staging, and